Game begin.
Let's go.
Or the Alliance.
Amazing.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I am joined, as always, by Sean. And today we're going to talk about an interesting lecture that Sean gave, I guess yesterday or earlier this morning about, on the topic of board game publishing and, creating a product and marketing a product in the board game space. So thought it would be a really awesome opportunity to kind of break it down and share some of the highlights on the podcast. And so we're just I'll probably offer some pithy commentary, but Sean's gonna teach us a lesson, right?
Yeah, well, I'll go through it. It was actually something I did this morning. Jad from Cat Iron Arts, who we've actually interviewed in the past, I think it's episode 63, asked me to do a lecture at a university that he's lecturing at. And the topic was board game marketing. So I kind of just tried to give a broad overview, but I figured there's enough in here that people can learn something from. In fact, I even uploaded an earlier draft. I did update it, but there's an earlier draft on the Crowdfunding Nerds YouTube channel. So we can put a link in the show notes if you want to see the actual lecture itself and skip this. But I did add to it. So
then
there's
you'd miss
little
my
bit
pithy
extra
commentary.
You'd miss Andrew's pithy commentary, but you'd see my lovely face.
Very good. So yeah, where do we start?
Great. So I'll just kind of jump around or jump through it. So I won't go through the entire thing. But the first thing I opened up with is this idea of RPG specialization. So in terms of board game marketing, you need to think about your specialization. What are you going to focus on? I tried to emphasize at the beginning of this talk that knowing why you're creating your game, it will impact how you market it. So for example, the specialization, and using role-playing games as an example, you kill monsters and you level up, and then you put your talent points in a certain tree, and then you eventually specialize and you unlock more abilities, and you'll be known as a subtlety rogue or something, whatever. So it's the same idea of board
Warlock
game.
the Destroyer.
Yeah. It's the same with board game marketing. You can either go into self-publishing, or you can seek a publisher. Those are your two kind of trees. But there's actually a third one that I think many people don't understand, which is your hybrid specialization, where you sort of do both. An example of this would be Joe Slack on episode 63 of the Crowdfunding Nerds podcast. We interviewed him, and he's a full-time board game designer. And he talks about a hybrid approach where he will self-publish 1 or 2 games a year because it's so intensive that he's not able to do anymore. And then all his other game designs he passes off to publishers that then produce. So there's a way where you can do both, but usually people specialize in one or the other. And then there's advantages, right, to being self-published, and also there's advantages to being a publisher as well as disadvantages. So self-publishing, the advantages is that you have creative control, you have schedule control, you have the highest profit margin, and that's the inverse for the publisher. Right? Because as a publisher, you don't have, if you go to a publisher, give your game to a publisher, you don't have creative control, you don't have schedule control, you don't have the highest profit margin because you're sharing your resources there.
But what do you have with a publisher? Like, why go with a publisher instead?
Well, that's because the disadvantage of self-publishing, which is your upfront investment, you've got to fork over all the money yourself to get the game produced. You have all the risk, especially if it's your first title. There's a lot to learn, and there's a lot that can go wrong. And then also the time investment. You got to invest a lot of time to figure out how to self-publish your game. Whilst with the publisher, the upfront investment is very little. It's just you really have to design a game that they like, that they're willing to take on. That's really it. The publisher takes on all the risk, and the publisher, you're leveraging all the time and investments that the publisher has with networks and industries in order to get your game out. So the advantages and disadvantages are inversed. So all the advantages for self-publishing are the disadvantages for publishing, and all the advantages of publishing are disadvantages for self-publishing.
It's very interesting because every once in a while, in fact, I think we interviewed Kyle Mann, the editor-in-chief of the Babylon Bee, at one point, because he had a book that he had released that I really liked. It was like a fantasy version of, it was like a nerd version of of Pilgrim's Progress, and which I actually really enjoyed. But the question was, like, this guy is, his day job is basically a satire writer, and not at all related to writing, in essence, like a Christian adjacent or a Christian fantasy fiction novel. And so I asked him, like, how did you get published? Because a lot of the time when you know, write a book, nobody wants to publish it, nobody cares, no matter how good it is nowadays. It could be the next Lord of the Rings and nobody will care, you know, for the most part, unless you have an audience, unless you actually have, you know, because the way that from what I've been told, the way that it works in book publishing nowadays is they really don't consider you anymore unless you have an audience. And that's why you get, you know, so many, I don't know, like I'm sure we're going to get a Kamala Harris memoir and a Joe Biden book and a Melania Trump book and a Donald Trump book and whatever, because those people have built-in audiences and people that care, that either love them or hate them and whatever. But like, what about like little old me that's making something and nobody cares yet, you know, one way or the other, right? And so you know, when you look at um the book publishing industry, you're really almost like required to have a mark. And actually, that's one of the things Kyle said is like the only reason that this book is really getting published is because we have a built-in audience that will buy it.
Mhm.
And I think a lot about that. And I think publishers that have built-in audiences are, I mean, that's the reason that you would go with a Chip Theory Games or a Stonemeyer Games or whatever. You hope that you can get your game published by someone like this, or yeah, I mean there are many other examples, but these companies have very large audiences that trust the products they make and will buy them. And so because they trust, you know, the products they make are going to kind of fit in with the interests, you know, of the other products that they've made. And but you know, you think about like a big book publisher like Penguin Random House, you know, that's like the, from what I can find, that's like the biggest book publisher out there. They have like so many books that the audience is kind of like 1 degree separated, 1 degree, 1 more degree separated from the publisher now. And so the audience is something that they rely on the publisher, the actual book writer to develop. And I think that's one thing that Brandon Sanderson did really well was, you know, with his Way of Kings, or the Stormlight Archive and the Cosmere universe and everything, he brought along a ton of fans that he built himself over time. And we've talked about this before on the podcast. But I think over time that this is going to be more and more important, even for designers that just make games, to have built-in audiences. You know, if, for example,
Mm.
I were to go, and this was actually my original intent with Deliverance, is like if I were to go um, give this to some other publisher, I want to have 1,000 people that are ready to buy it right now. So in addition to however many people the publisher has and can market to and everything like that, I'm adding value right away, and it will increase the likelihood of my staying power and all that. And I think that overall that is a little undervalued by publishers now. They don't really kind of think in all along those terms. But I find that if you do have an audience that is ready to buy your product, that's always a good thing. Always.
It's kind of
So,
like actors, right? With films, some people would just go watch the film because Tom Cruise is in it, and
mhm.
he kind of has an audience
That's right.
that no matter
I'll
what
watch
film you,
whatever Mission Impossible comes out. You know, like
yeah. So
Tom
people,
Cruise driving a helicopter. Yeah, I'll watch it.
so I think this is why, and they know this, and this is why they can charge so much to be in a film because they're really bringing an audience that sort of follows this personality around.
Yep.
So the reason you need to think about whether you're going to publish or self-publish is it's going to affect the way you market. So the question you need to ask yourself is why you design the game. Are you trying to start a publishing business? So are you thinking in terms of longevity? I want to have several titles under my belt, or are you only planning on publishing one game and being done? Is your goal to make as much money as possible and make this a profitable business, or is it more so of a hobby, or more so as a thing you just want to get into the world and you want to share with people? So all of those questions will really alter how you market your game. And there's other ways of marketing. Well, I suppose there's other ways of monetizing games which might not seem obvious. So, do you remember that we interviewed Max Dennis, episode 95? He created the dinosaur park game called
Uh-huh.
Storia.
Yeah.
So he's an example of someone who went to Kickstarter with his first project. It was something he just really wanted to see in the world. It was a profitable game. It was successful. We helped him market it. And through this process of creating that game, he was then able to leverage that at a job interview, and he used it as a portfolio piece. He was able to say, oh, this is what I learned and this is what I did in order to do this. And he got a job in the industry. So there's an example of how you can monetize a board game in a way that isn't, it's not about selling as many units as possible. It's actually through the process of creating it, it was able to be a stepping stone into a career within the board game industry. So that's a really great example of how you can monetize board games, which might not be in a way that's particularly noticeable at first. And then,
do you think that like if I were to say, like, I originally made my game so that I could just see it enter the world. It's the game that I just really wanted to play, and I originally had no intent to be a publisher. But because I was faced with the choice of either it doesn't exist or I make it, that's why I made that choice. But do you think that, I mean, it feels like a lot of people kind of enter into the industry with this really great idea, and they're like, I want to see this enter into the world. I'm willing to put my money behind it. I want full creative control. And, if it makes money, like, we'll go from there. Like that, we'll kind of decide what happens. Do you think that there's a step that they missed? Or do you think that that's like an appropriate way to kind of, go in, jump into the pool for the first time?
I know. I think some people might come into it because they want to make a bunch of money. Like, oh, board games are so popular, and I got a great idea, and they realize, oh wait, I've got to sell so many units in order to be profitable, and I don't think I'm going to be able to sell that much. Oh wow, look how much work that's to go into making this. So I think that could also deter people. So they kind of came in with a faulty assumption, and then they're deterred as they actually investigate, look into things.
Mhm.
I think there's many reasons why people decide
Illusions
to
of grandeur. We've seen some of that.
Yeah, well, even some people, they're not as committed to the world that they're creating. They just want to design a game. So, they're quite happy to pass it off to a publisher and have them reskin it and tweak it and tune it, because they just kind of enjoy the process of kind of tooling around and making games. And they're not so kind of tied to the world that they've created. It's almost like a placeholder, and you do whatever you want. I've created like a mechanism to have fun and just, do whatever you want with it. So I'm sure there's people who design like that as well. And they just want to get as many designs out as possible and kind of stretch their design prowess. And it's not so much about, communicating an experience through a world that you're creating and you're trying to get people into a certain theme.
I would say that is the more seasoned designer feel it does it that way. They probably come into things with a theme idea, and they're like, okay, it's a nature theme where you're doing whatever, and every once in a while something like an Elizabeth Hargrave with an idea of making a game around bird watching. That theme obviously stuck and it became Wingspan, right? But there are a lot of experienced designers that come with a theme idea in mind, and I think that's an important thing to come with a publisher with, like, basically a theme that blends the mechanics with what it is that you're doing, so that the theme doesn't just feel pasted on. Like if you rethemed Wingspan into like zombies, I don't know if you could get the mechanics to feel natural, although I'd like to see someone try zombie span. But
Flesh span.
Flesh span, wow. So I don't think that's a good title. So but then you have, like, on the other hand, and these are people I've been talking to very recently, care very, very much about the world that they've created. They've created something very important in this world. Like Donnie Chase, for example, somebody who works for us now. When I talked to him in, I want to say, like 2018 or 2019, we met at a convention for the first time, and he had this idea for a game. And since then, he's written an entire like 53 chapter book in that universe. And so whatever game he makes, it's really important that it's in that universe. I've had other discussions with people. In fact, very recently, a TCG that somebody wants to make, and I'm just telling them, like, this is a very, very hard product to actually make work. It's possible, but it's very difficult. They're like, oh, we have like books we've planned, we have video games, we've got like movies and other things that we're planning all in this universe. And I'm like, yeah, but if one product doesn't cut through the market significantly deep enough to make a true splash, then all the other things aren't going to matter. You make a book, you make 500 sales, or whatever. It's like that's not enough to be a blip on a publishing company's radar, right?
Yeah, like
And
Star
so
Wars didn't start there. And Star Wars started as films, and then they branched out to comics and video games. And so I think people,
it was because people cared, right? And
yeah, like 40K
so-
as well. I think a lot of people think that, oh, I'm going to be the next 40K. It's like, well, it took decades to get to where they are. And
yeah, and that's, I think we talked about that recently with Mark D.S. Truman of Magpie, who talked about the difficulty of becoming an intellectual property that people care about. And I think that it's worth just kind of considering how truly difficult that is. I would go listen to that episode. That, in fact, I would say that's probably my favorite episode that we've ever recorded in like recent memory. In the last 100 episodes, the episode of Mark D.S. Truman is probably my favorite because of the knowledge bombs, like the deep level knowledge bombs that Mark was able to share about that very topic. It's like how difficult it is to get people to care about your stuff as an intellectual property. How difficult it, and I've experienced this like with Deliverance, dude. It's like had a couple of, a couple thousand people back the first game. I sold 5,000 units, and it's like, yeah, this is really great. Sold another, 3,500 so far on just with the expansion. So maybe more like 7,000, and between the base game and the expansion, and that's very successful by a lot of measures. But oh my goodness, if I'm going to actually make this thing continue, I can't just survive with set whatever 12,000 sales. Like if I want to be an actual company with staff and whatnot, I need to make like 10, 12,000 sales a year, on that thing. So that is something that we're building toward, but it's a challenge, real challenge. There are a lot of different levels of that, but you know, something that is, I find sometimes, and maybe this is a good thing, like you can't deter some people from going forward. They're like, nope, I need full control. I need to do it all my way. I'm gonna make a trading card game and I'm gonna compete with Magic the Gathering. I'm just gonna beat Magic. And it's like, well, that's like really tough. But it takes crazy people with really, really big ideas to actually do that. And what I find is like it's so easy just to not believe in someone. In fact, I mean, I'll say like sometimes I'm just like, well, this is a fun idea, but I just don't know how it's going to work. But my role as a marketer, like it's not my job to tell someone who's the visionary that I don't have vision like you have for your product. It's my job to really, at the end of the day, I give my counsel, I give my advice, I help I try to help give them as much direction and whatnot so that the visionary can realize their vision. It's their job to bring that vision to fruition, but as the marketer, it's my job to help and to do what I can, right? Not to tell them I don't think it's going to work. At the end of the day, I mean, I've told people that, and they said, "Well, we're going to do it anyway. We believe in this product. We're going to do it anyway." And I'm like, "Well, if you're if my advice isn't deterring you, then I'll support you. I'll support you. I have worked for people, they've paid me money, and I'm like, I don't know if this is gonna generate a return for you. And they're like, well, we want to do it anyway. I'm like, well, I guess you're the visionary, and at the end of the day, I need to like get in the right seat. I'm not the visionary for your company, and in many cases, it's actually turned out for just in an excellent way for the creator, um and those people, I would be doing such a disservice by being a naysayer to them. And actually what would truly happen if they were like me, I would just like ditch somebody telling me my idea sucks and then go with somebody that's like, all right, I'll support your idea, right? It's kind of why I think that parents should always support their kids crazy ridiculous ideas, you know if your kid has a ridiculous idea, or if your parents, like my parents didn't really like that I started a business. They expected me to go get a master's degree and then work for them and, become a billionaire after a company paid for my master's degree. And I would then quit and take their businesses and like really increase them. But right after college, I started my own business and was like suffering, trying to make ends meet every month with rent. They didn't really believe in me at that time, and that was painful. It's painful to work through. So I think belief, it's really important to foster that And in some cases, like I said, the crazy people with ridiculous ideas are the ones that are going to make it work, right? So
Yeah, everyone thought George Lucas was nuts when he, came up with Star Wars, and the actors saying these
mhm,
quirky things like, oh goodness. I know one of
yeah,
the guy who did the actual the graphic, the intro with the crawling screen, he didn't take a
the choice
um
to take a percentage of sales
yes, you
for
had
the
a choice
movie.
to take a royalty or just a flat fee, and he had been screwed over so many times by just not getting anything that he got rid of the royalties to give me a flat fee. But if he had taken the royalty,
Mhm,
he'd been very well off. So, but yeah, that's an idea that people, and again, we're not infallible. We've been wrong, so we can look at something and say, "Oh, I'm not sure about this," and then it exceeds our expectations. Like, okay, well, we're wrong. So I don't want to be
mhm,
the arbiter of what can or cannot succeed.
mhm.
We always want to be open, but generally we can give our professional advice and hopefully guide people. And if anything else, even if a project does fail, I think people through marketing, they'll know why it failed.
Mhm.
Hopefully, by good marketing, you should have a good idea of why it failed,
Yep.
and you'll be able to course correct even if you have a failed campaign.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Failing a campaign doesn't necessarily mean that your journey's over. That just it's like a step in the journey. The road to success is paved with failure,
mhm.
as the adage goes. So anyway, go ahead.
So the other ways to monetize your board game, as we continue this thought, we did a podcast episode 126 with uh, Cat Iron Art, Cat Iron Arts about B2B partnerships in board games. So this is the idea of putting like product placement in your board game, or going to like a tourist board and including like iconic areas
Mhm.
in your board game to kind of promote the country's tourism or something. There's grants available for that type of thing. So there's other ways of monetizing your board game outside of just, you know, selling lots of games. You could find some type of sponsor who will be willing to throw in some money if you are going to include some of their products or locations or whatever in your board game, etc. And that's just an interesting way. So that's episode 126 if you want to learn more about that. So that's sort of understanding why you want to design your game. And so we have self-publishing, which is really what we focus on, right? We help people raise funds through crowdfunding to self-publish. But there's resources out there which I would direct people to if they want to publish games. So if you're not interested in self-publishing, you just want to find a publisher, that's actually requires a different set of marketing skills. So there's a gentleman called Adam in Wales. It's a YouTube channel and very good. A lot of tips on how to pitch to publishers. It's actually I found it's the exact opposite. Pitching to publishers is the inverse of pitching to customers, because for the publisher, uh, as a game designer pitching to a publisher, he was saying that you should focus on mechanics, which is actually the last thing that you focus on when you pitch your
Mhm.
game to an audience. You focus on theme and art, whilst with a publisher, they're likely going to reskin or retheme your game. So they just want to know that basically what they're buying is they're buying from you. Is this a well balanced game, or does this game work, and is it fun? Is the
Mhm.
kind of thing in it unique, and is it something that can work in the marketplace as a business idea? So that's kind of so it's a different marketing skill set. So I think that requires
Yeah.
some investigation.
Also, when you're marketing and pitching to publishers, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get them to buy into your vision is really kind of what it is. So, like I remember Eric Lang posted on Twitter about his opinion on having art done for a prototype. He actually said that it is very, very valuable if you do have art done for a prototype. If your prototype looks nice versus if it looks ugly, it makes a huge difference to him. And as one of the most prolific game designers in the scene, that was advice that I kind of took to heart. Is like, in theory, you're right that publishers will likely, they want to have the option to reskin everything, to change the graphic design, to change the theme, and that kind of thing, just totally upend the story. But sometimes they're just looking for a vision that they can latch onto as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's never a bad idea to even work to set the vision for a publisher, but be open for them to changing it.
And understanding their catalog, how can this new game enhance what they already have or supplement what they already have? So
Right.
that's an important thing. You need to do a bit of your research before going to a publisher and just trying to dump a game on their lap.
Mhm.
Understand their business, things really going to help. Another resource, if you want to go through the publisher route, is the Board Game Design Lab. If you go to boardgamedesignlab.com/get dash published. There's a bunch of resources there that can help you on your publishing journey.
Yeah.
So that's
Secret, by the way, speaking of the Board Game Design Lab, the podcast used to be, I mean, they've had hundreds of episodes, and they're going to be, at least for a short time, reigniting the podcast for a little while. So something fun to look out for. I don't know if it's, by the time this episode airs, maybe they'll have one. Maybe not. I'm not sure, but that's something that I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I heard someone on this podcast is going to be on this relaunch.
Yeah, you heard it here first.
So now that we've sort of covered publishing, let's focus on self-publishing. This is really what we focus on. So how to market your board games through self-publishing. Well, it's really done through crowdfunding, right? You go to crowdfunding. The reason you're going to crowdfunding is because you are essentially getting pre-orders that you can then bring to a manufacturer and say, hey, print this exact amount, and then you're able to fulfill it to a very close proximity of how much you raised, and you're mitigating the risk of printing 5,000 units and you sell 2. So you're kind of stopping that from happening.
That happens a lot, by the way. There are so many people that every once in a while somebody comes to us and says, I've made 1,000 games. I need to now sell them. So help me sell them. And I'm looking at the art and the design, and I was like, oh my goodness, you made such a mistake. This is going to be very hard to sell, And they're like, okay, well, we'll just do a crowdfunding campaign. Like, well, what if you do very well and you need to make more than 1,000 copies, or what if people don't like it in its current form, but you can't change it because it's already printed. So mistake at every level. But yeah, the crowdfunding kind of puts the risk, if you will. It I wouldn't say it puts the risk on the customer. It balances the risk between you and the customer, who is willing to take a chance on you. They're willing to back your idea.
So when it comes to crowdfunding, we've said this many times in the podcast, but you need a crowd to crowdfund. So the idea of going to Kickstarter and just launching something is,
can't do it anymore.
You can't do it anymore. So that's something that we can't stress enough. You need a crowd to crowdfund. And so the process that we use in order to develop a crowd before you go to Kickstarter, we call it the virtuous cycle. So Andrew, do you want to explain to folks what is the famous virtuous cycle? How does it work?
Yeah, so the virtuous cycle kind of originated from the idea of a positive feedback loop in a video game, where, and I think I learned it in school as that, the terminology was the virtuous cycle, and then I stopped hearing it from that point on. So I originally learned the concept in business school, and then the only place I ever saw it actually take place was in video games, where, like in World of Warcraft, you're level 1 and you kill, little trolls, and you gain a level and you become stronger, which makes it easier to kill the trolls, which makes you enjoy killing the trolls more, and then you get to level up and kill boars, which are higher level and offer greater rewards. And this positive feedback of gaining levels for like killing trolls and boars or whatever and gaining levels makes you want to do that even more, because you're getting better at it, which actually brings about the end of the game. So eventually you're slaying dragons inside huge dungeons and fire lords and whatever. And it's a really epic experience that you kind of, through the mechanics of the game, the positive feedback you received, you actually made it to the end of the game, doing what the game wanted you to do, following the path that it wanted you to go on, not because the game was telling you to do it, but because the actual rewards were great as you kind of went along that path. If you decided to reject leveling up, you're kind of avoiding playing the game, and that's actually not very fun. So there are a lot of things that people try to do that you might like I did a gnomish death race from Ironforge to Stormwind once, level 1 gnome, trying to run all the way from one city to the other in World of Warcraft. And it was fun once with like my whole guild, but I'd never do it again. I'd level up, right? That positive feedback loop is why I play the game. That's that candy, pulling a slot machine and you get something. And so you want to pull the slot machine again. So anyway, the virtuous cycle is the way that we kind of turn this positive feedback loop into something that banks the results of your marketing effort. Because when you're spending your time your effort, energy, and your money on marketing, then it does no good if you don't have a way to kind of bank the results of your effort. So the virtuous cycle, what we do is we basically bring people in, whichever way they come in, they have to get onto your email list. And then when they're on your email list, they have to we want them there because they're interested in what it is that you're selling. That is the not because they get a free thing or because they get entered into a giveaway, but because they're genuinely interested in what it is that you're making. And from that point, we have to kind of warm them up by sharing bits about the thing they're interested in. And by doing that, we are not only we're not only giving someone the information that they requested, but by giving them the information that they requested, they're getting more and more excited to actually buy the thing that you're going to eventually crowdfund. And so the virtuous cycle, all in all, what it's supposed to do is it takes somebody in that's like, oh, I'm curious about what that thing is. I'll subscribe for like emails, or I'll join the Facebook group, or I'll just check out this ad or look at this landing page. And then, or maybe I'll look at it on a table at a convention, like at a it's a prototype. So I'm gonna look at it at this convention. Take them from that point of being barely interested, like a very cold lead, to somebody that is a super duper excited and ready to back your product no matter what else is launching on the very first day. And they're going to tell all their friends about it, and they're going to figure out how they can help you after that. And they're going to participate in all of the things that you do. They're going to be opinionated on your stretch goals, and they're going to be a long-term part of your community. That is the goal of the virtuous cycle.
And it's a system by which you can also improve your game development. So part of the system is using your crowdfunding event as a collaborative exercise to bring people into the universe you've created, but also refine your game. So the idea is that as you're growing your community, you then can play test with them, and then they can offer suggestions, and then you can implement them, and then you go back to playtesting, and you kind of go through the cycle of your community is growing, and your community is helping you spread the word and grow, and then you're using the community to also improve the product and to improve your offer before you go to Kickstarter. So this is very important that you let people know your pledge levels and what you're thinking, and getting their feedback before you launch, so that when people who are completely fresh, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, seeing a project for the first time, well, they're not seeing it from an amateur. They're seeing it from a process that has been tried and tested, iterated over time. So this is part of the entire process of crowdfunding. It's not just to raise money. So it's also about using the whole event to market your game and build your business.
Absolutely. And that's actually the way that Awaken Realms does things. So like as a company, Awaken Realms has some of the biggest crowdfunding events out there. And Marcin, the CEO of Awaken Realms, he actually was very open about, you want your backers, you want your potential backers to know the prices of your game. You want them to know what the game does, what it includes component wise, everything else about the game before you launch, so that they're just ready to buy on day one.
Mm-hmm. So let's say you got the virtuous cycles set up, and in terms of self-publishing and marketing your board game, there's really 3 key areas you have to get right. Otherwise, your project will fail. And we've seen this where if in any of these areas there's a chink in the armor, the whole kind of house of cards collapses, so to speak. And they are: 1, your meta ads, Facebook ads; 2, your email communication; and then 3, your crowdfunding page itself.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which coincidentally, we have courses coming out very, very soon on each of those topics, right, Sean?
Well, yeah, so there's a lot we could say about this. In fact, we've done 3 courses that do a deep dive into each 3 of these subjects, but we want to basically briefly cover them here now quickly, just so people get a taste and idea. So if we start with meta ads, and there's really 3 important elements to your meta ads, which is your targeting and your ability to define what your product is, and then to get a click. That's really the only purpose your meta ads have, is to say, answer the question, what is this, to the right people and get a click. That's it. It's not designed, like, I think one of the dangers, people want to like tell everyone about their game and all the like every detail about it at the meta ads level. So like, oh, it's a deck building worker placement game where I was developing it for 20 years and blah blah, and like all this background
A
information.
game like no other with revolutionary mechanics and infinite replayability
Yeah.
and deep strategy.
When really the thing that you need to leverage with your meta ads is the theme and the art. So those are the two things that are really going to move the needle at this early stage of marketing. Because really, you're trying to answer the question, and going back to our episode that we had with Mark of Magpie Games, is the game is not the product. The experience is the product. So you're trying to sell a world in which people want to spend a lot of time in. When people say, oh, actually, I really like this world where I'm like a kung fu master shooting fireballs. That sounds fun. I want to spend some time in that world. And that's kind of the first thing that people will look into. And then it's like, oh, I realize this is a card game. It's like a dueling card game or whatever. And that's when the more mechanics come in. But to begin with, they need to first see the art and that, oh, this looks interesting. It takes itself seriously. I think when we say art, is that the art needs to be professional. So I think everyone knows that there's a difference between professional and amateur art. So we're not necessarily talking about style, but we're talking about an art style that does take itself seriously and it presents itself in a way that's professional.
And is consistent. I think maybe even addressing AI art here, you might have like one or two really great AI images that just show like that make it look super impressive. But the more that a gamer looks at your product, it's like, oh, that's very interesting. And they click through to your landing page. The more that they see like a disjointed, weird product because it's filled with AI art, the more they're going to recognize it as amateurish. And AI art, by the way, just usually AI art to me, it shows that a game is probably not very well tested. If they're cutting corners on the art, they're probably cutting corners on the playtesting and the graphic design and in I would say 9 out of 10 AI art games, that's the case. We have very a limited number of AI art games that are amazing. Like we did Algomancy. We helped market Algomancy, which was a really great game. And but yeah, so I just figured I would mention that.
Yeah, so one of the reasons we're using meta ads is because of the robust targeting. So we can target people who have interest in Kickstarter, plus board games, plus sci-fi, if that you have a sci-fi board game. So it makes it very powerful, and you're able to work out very quickly what's working, what isn't working. And also through the process of running your meta ads, and by answering the question, what is this? In the case of Deliverance, it's the Angelic Warfare board game. You're able to A/B test all the different combinations of what is it, so that you can kind of perfect that messaging. By the time you go to Kickstarter, you'll know how to word the what is it and put it at the forefront of your Kickstarter page. So it's very useful in that case. So that is the meta ads. We swiftly moving on. We can jump to the. I have stuff here on the landing page. We could probably skip that for now. Let's talk about email communication. That's probably the next sort of pillar in our phase. So there's three elements that you need to get right with email communication. And it's your subject line, segmentation, and the schedule. So the subject line is the first thing they're going to see. It directly impacts the open rate. The segmentation, you want to be able to divide people who are engaged and people who are less engaged. Again, so you can maximize your email open rate, you can maximize your reach. And then the schedule, the actual time of day and the day itself is very important. Actually, Andrew, you know what I recently did as a project I've been running, I was able to take out, download the CSV file of all the email subscribers and then find the column which stipulates when people sign up, at what time of day and what day. And I was able to just throw that into Bing chat and just say, using this column, say, hey, assuming that this is when people are most engaged, tell me which day and which time of day is the best time to send an email out. And then it just kind of, compiles it. Oh, this is when people are most likely to sign up. So this time it was like a Tuesday at like 8:00 in the morning or something. It's like, okay, that's interesting. So I think you can even use your own data set as a way to kind of work out when's the best time when your community is most active. Because when they sign up for your email, that's when they're active, right? That's when they're actually taking actions on the internet. So it's a good way to kind of work out when people are willing to open emails or read and discover new things.
Yeah. I find that open times, at least, are largely determined by three times. One is before work, then you have got lunch break, and then you got after work. Those oftentimes are the times people open emails, and sometimes a 15-minute break or whatever. But most oftentimes, people opening emails in particular before work, lunch break, or after work, social media is usually the thing that fills in all of these spots where they have 5 minutes here or 10 minutes there. It's not as common to open emails at that time. I'm guessing because people are probably unable to take further action, and so they're usually going to save things that could require further action for those, the times that they have more availability. Um, but yeah, I think subject line is massively important. It's the single most important factor. In fact, like during our email marketing course, I spend about half of the amount of time of the entire course on subject line. Like we literally we do like at least 2 hours of time like focused on the subject line, and it is
My God.
probably the most robust teaching that I've ever given on that subject. I learned a lot just, when you put together all this information and you remember all the things you forgot and you're looking at, so like I give a lecture on like what you should do, what makes a great subject line, but then I actually go through an application of like what were all of these subject lines that I have sent out and what was the open rate and why was it good or why was it bad or why was it surprising, and all it's all related to the subject line. And then I did a workshop where we take 5 very common terrible subject lines and like for example, check out my Kickstarter, and then we actually drill into what I used Terraforming Mars as the game as an example for the workshop, but we worked with the students to figure out how to turn this bad subject line into a really really good subject line that gets a great open rate. It's like
Yeah, so your subject lines are important. In terms of segmentation, we recommend MailerLite and Abrevio are the two systems that you can use to do segmentation. They both do it and they work fine. The best time to send your email, we've really kind of talked a little bit about that, but there's actually an article we can include in the show notes where MailerLite did a blog of the best time to send emails in 2025. So they compiled all their data from all the email sends of 2024. It basically works out to be about a Monday, 5 a.m. PST in the games category. So that's I could just saved you some time if you want to just go there. So the next thing, the final thing, the pillar of crowdfunding is the crowdfunding page itself. And we've often talked about episode 10 all that time ago, but it's so relevant even today with Jeremy Howard of Matt vs. Meeple talking about the 3-scroll test. So you really have to test your Kickstarter page on a mobile phone. Most people are going to be on mobile phones, and it's going to be 1 or 3 scrolls is what you need to get people's attention. So you really have to optimize the very top of your Kickstarter page.
absolutely. We call these things hygiene factors. The concept behind hygiene factors, for those that are listening and don't know what that means, is like when you go out on a date with someone for the very first time, if you brush your teeth, that doesn't necessarily mean you're getting a second date with that person. It's all about if you connect with them, if you had a good time, if you treated them well, and so many other factors. But if you failed to brush your teeth, it will absolutely hurt your chances of getting a second date. If you fail to comb your hair, if you fail to dress, appropriately, if you go without a shirt and without pants, like you're just gonna, unless you're on a really weird date, it's going to hurt your
on the beach.
chances. Yeah. If you look like a psychopath, then your chances of getting a second date are diminished. In the same way, when you're missing these hygiene factors of like, a quick definition of what your game is, a quick overview of the gameplay, a quick overview of the theme, a playthrough video, a review by someone who is reputable, so many other things, a clear offer with a very well presented price, and what is inside the box like needs to look like really great. Like it is very much worth what you're asking for and more. If you're just like, oh, you get all this, you get 110 cards in the box, but it's just a line of text and you don't show me the cards and what they look like and how they kind of maybe even interact with each other, then I'm not going to really understand the value. Like I can just go buy 2 decks of bicycle cards from my local Target, and I have 100 and whatever, 100 and close to 110, right? So where's the true value, And so your shipping, if your game costs 40 and your shipping costs 20, that's a bad ratio. Make your game cost 50 or 49 and your shipping cost 11. you know.
Well, I think that's the biggest problem we often see when we review Kickstarter pages. The layout, yeah, there's usually things you can improve with the layout, but I think the number one thing is getting the offer right. Is what is the value compared to the price that they're asking for? And the offer in this case is everything. It's the cost of shipping, the cost of the tax, and the pledge level itself. So, what is the final asking price when compared to all of the contents in the game? And this really has a lot to do with your manufacturing, right? So, if you don't manufacture at a large enough quantity, you cannot have a competitive price. This is kind of the catch 22. So, for example, your manufacturing, your sort of landed your MSRP, your manufacturer suggested retail price, the final price you offer should be about 5 or 6 times your landed cost, which is the cost to get a game from the manufacturer to the final destination to the person. That includes everything: your manufacturing, your shipping, your tax, all that stuff. So let's say that your game cost $20, your MSRP should be around $100 or $120, should sort of be within that range. Now, let's say that you had a manufacturing run where you could only print 1,000 units, and 1,000 units at $25 would cost an MSRP of about $125 to $150. But the exact same game with 5,000 units, you could do it at $15 per game. You could sell that 75 or 90. So if people are used to buying games for $90 or $75, and but you're asking for 150 because you didn't manufacture enough, there's a huge problem just there where there's a disconnect between the value and your asking price. So quantity matters, and it really impacts the offer that you can give people.
Yeah, and this is truly where companies are built or not. You know, when so like using an actual example, Deliverance is very close to that. Where if I made 1,000 units, it would be like $25 a unit, in addition to the molding fees for miniatures and stuff. But like $25 a unit would put it at times 5, or well, let's just say plus an extra $2-3 per unit to ship. It's $28 a unit. That's about $150 for a game, maybe 140, and that's too high for the type of game that it is. I can't charge 140. What I could do is I could charge 90 on Kickstarter and then sell it, for basically $30 a unit. I could make $90, and I would have enough that I could make the print run and ship it, and then with additional shipping investment by backers, $20 a piece or whatever, I could get the game into their hands. But what I could not do is I could not actually reprint the game with the funds that I would earn by selling through the print run. I wouldn't have enough money to actually reprint. So where the 5 to 6x becomes important is, like, first of all, it allows you to sell to distributors and retailers and whatnot. But the main thing is that it lets you actually reprint the game. So if I made my game and I printed 5,000 units, I get about $17 a unit, and I'm able to sell it effectively at about $100, which is $99 MSRP for Deliverance, because it's about between $2 to $3 for freight, and there's your $20 landed cost, and so I can actually make money and kind of stay in business that way. So that's kind of why those numbers are important. But then, like, if I could print 10,000 or even 15,000 units or 30,000, then the cost per unit drops significantly. Let's just say it's like $14 a unit. That extra, I don't have to like reduce the price of my game. So, there's a reason that Catan, like every Catan game, comes with like no insert, no, I mean, it's just like loose, like fitting, cards in the box and whatnot, and low quality components and everything. It's because when they can sell lots and lots of games, they actually can reduce the price of the game and still charge the same, the price to manufacture it, but still charge the same to the customer, and the customer will be happy. So it's an interesting way to like kind of maintain your business. If you're able to charge 10 times what the product is worth, because you're printing so much, or rather 10 times what the product costs to manufacture. You are going to be able to not only sustain and make another print run, but you're going to be able to have, employees and warehousing and other things like that that will, make your operation successful.
Yeah. So I suppose just a quick recap as we bring things into a landing here. You want to think about board game specialization that determines how you market your game, whether you're going to self-publish or be a publisher. It's very different marketing channels depending on which specialization you tackle. You need a crowd to crowdfund, so you can't go to crowdfunding without a crowd. You need to have a think about how you can build that crowd using something like the virtuous cycle. And then there's really three key elements to your marketing board game through crowdfunding. It's your meta ads, your email communication, and your crowdfunding page optimization. Now, thankfully, we have released courses on each of those kind of three pillars of crowdfunding. So if you go to crowdfundingnerds.com/academy, then you can sign up and join the waitlist for the launch. We'll offer a massive discount, but it's really going to be worth your time. We've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this, and we really uncover our entire process. We don't hold anything back. So if you want to know basically everything you need to know to go from zero to hero in terms of getting your game out there and understanding our tried and tested method, then the Crowdfunding Nerds Academy is something that you should definitely check out. We'll include a link in the show notes.
Yeah, the reason that we built this was because there were a lot of people that just weren't able to afford our marketing services, but have a passion project and are intent on self-publishing. So here's a resource that you can use that actually takes hundreds of hours of our I mean, we're on episode, what is this, episode 222 right now, or 221, and it distills well over 200 hours of podcast content, well over 200 firsthand client case studies that we've marketed in the tabletop niche on on Kickstarter. And I mean, we've raised at this point we've helped raise over $30 million for crowdfunding clients. And I myself, including like all of my my work that I've done just in e-commerce, not counting that $30 million, I have helped raise over $100 million for e-commerce clients. A lot of which are tabletop, some of which are like, we've had clients on Shark Tank, we've had clients that do like as seen on TV products, and I've had a lot of experience in e-commerce and just selling stuff. I've been doing this since I guess 2009, so going on 16 years, and that you're getting all of that from somebody hopefully you trust, because you're listening to me at minute 52 of the of a podcast. So anyway, I hope that you guys find it valuable. Oh, also, we're selling this at the lowest rate that we'll ever sell it for. It's $699 for all three of these courses. It's $599 for two. And if you're just looking for one, if you just want email marketing, you just want Facebook ads, it's $399 for one single course. Normally, each course is going to be $700, and we actually we raised the price of our Facebook ads course, which was $600. We've had that out for 2 years, and people buy that regularly at $600. So if you want it for $400, or you want to bundle all three for $699, then this is going to be your opportunity to do that. We're having this sale from March 10th through the 31st. So, save your pennies and make sure to jump on board when the time comes. So go to crowdfundingnerds.com/academy and sign up for the email list. You'll get a link you'll get a lot more information on what's actually in the courses and more about what they cover. You'll actually also be able to get free previews of the course content as well. So,
and we're going to be updating it as well as time goes on. Today, I actually just re-uploaded an update to the Kickstarter to the Facebook ads, because Meta has recently changed some of their interface and hidden a lot of the options that you need in order to successfully run your crowdfunding campaign. So they're trying to push everyone towards AI. So if you're a complete newbie, you have no idea what you're doing, you just kind of go through the steps without knowing what they are, it's going to set up your campaign to fail. It's going to set it up in such a way which using AI, and you have no control over what it's targeting or what it's doing, and you won't be able to figure out what's happening. So it's really important that you kind of know those basic steps. That's just an example of something we updated for free. We didn't charge anymore. It's just an update, so everyone who's bought the course can see that update, and we'll continue to do that as technology changes and as things develop.
Yeah, that's an important thing that is just an extra bit of value. We're giving you guys with this from March 10th to the 31st, lifetime access and lifetime updates. So if you buy it one time, you will have this information forever, as long as the server has it, I guess. I don't know if like we get hit with a nuke and it disappears. Like I can't control that, but I can say that you will have forever access if you grab it then. So and from well, I guess, I'd love to chat about this more from like a marketing perspective, which we did a couple of episodes ago about like what it's been like to try to market a course like this, or our academy, and it's been a very interesting, very unique challenge that has stretched Sean and I both in different ways, and I think that there are a lot of lessons to be learned, but I feel like 85% of marketing any product that there is out there, whether it's like marketing yourself as a plumber, or marketing a board game on Kickstarter or GameFound, or marketing a course online, like I think there are so many principles that are universal to these things. Like you have to be talking to the right audience. You have to make your offer very clear, and like why there's value in it, and that kind of thing. And it's like it's all about what you say and how you organize yourself, so that people can understand what you're presenting in a very clear manner. So it's really tough to do that when you're marketing a course or a course series like the Crowdfunding Nerds Academy, without sounding like totally full of yourself. Like, yeah, I'm awesome. I made 100 million for clients on e-commerce or whatever. It's like, I would rather personally have other people say that I'm good than me say that I'm awesome. Um, and so that's been a really interesting challenge to navigate while marketing this thing. But it's been it's been a
It's been a lot of
fun.
work. I'm glad that it's coming to a head.
Yeah. So it's like anybody else making a game, which I'm a board game publisher. I've had 2 Kickstarter crowdfunding campaigns, and it's really tough to like go through all that work, and so that somebody can finally enjoy the thing that you've made. It's been a real journey. So we're not taking this thing to crowdfunding. um we could, but it's like there's really no point. It's like the information is there. We finished it. We have an audience. We're building an email list and other things like that, just like we teach everybody to do. And but when it's live, we're just making it live. So anyway.
Yeah, because we're not gonna turn it off. There's no expiry date. So once it's live, and then the sale will end. But then we're gonna just continue to run all our processes and continue to keep the machine on, so to speak. So
Yeah. So yeah, and it's interesting because last thing I'll mention is like the sale price is a curious thing. If it just sells like hotcakes, like it at minimum at the end of March 31st, we're increasing the price by $100, like the sale price, and that's like that's a guarantee. But after that, I don't know. It's possible we could drop it back down 100 like a year from now, or something like that. But it's never going to be a lower price than it currently is right now. Um, and so that's something that, you always want to leave yourself open. You don't want to like pigeonhole yourself as a business and be like, I'm never ever changing my strategy, because you never know what will happen like after your product releases. But I can guarantee that it's never going to be a lower price than this. So just like we did with our last course,
yes,
and with Facebook ads, we actually sold that if you bought early, you got that course for like $209 or something, and now our sale price is 400. So it definitely, I mean, I guess if you had 2 courses and you added a third one, it's like plus $100. So in theory, like, but per course, it's still costing you a little bit more than it did 2 years ago, right? So anyway, well, I think that is good. Hopefully all the students really appreciated you sharing all that information. I sure do. So let's have Robot Richard send us on out.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.